Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. I'm Anthony. He's Ron, and we're about to uncover the MAGA propaganda that is not covered by the mainstream and corporate media. Ron, since we last spoke, America has invaded Venezuela, threatened Greenland. Cuba is worried. Colombia is worried. The European Union are worried. And Donald Trump seems to be loving this, right? Oh, Mexico, of course. Let's not leave them out. And Trump, I actually wrote a Substack about this. I think that Trump now really loves the moniker of dictator. And I think that he got a bit of a taste of it all when he started seizing oil tankers and then seizing Maduro. Oh, we left out the kidnapping. And now I think he's kind of thinking this is his new job description, is dictator in chief.
You know, none of his domestic policy stuff came as any surprise to me, just about none of it. I mean, because he talked about a lot of it, and a lot of it was in Project 2025. But the foreign policy stuff, I think, has caught everyone off guard, even close Trump observers, even Republicans in Congress. And I don't think that Republicans in Congress want any of this. They want to focus on a domestic agenda. They're not interested in Greenland or Panama or Mexico or seizing oil. And so it's sort of, for them, I think they're sort of trying to figure out how to handle this situation, because this is not what they told their voters was going to happen. But you're right. I mean, Trump is just, he's drunk with power. He loves bombing people. He loves seizing things. He loves intimidating people. He loves everyone being afraid of him around the world and not knowing what he's going to do next. And it's no way for us to live as Americans. It's no way for people around the world to live. I mean, the Venezuela thing is just a perfect example, because, when he goes in there, the Venezuelan community, which is a massive community in Florida, very influential community in South Florida, lots of voters, Venezuelan Americans, and, huge community. They were all euphoric, along with the Cubans and, most of the other Latin Americans, the Colombian Americans. They thought, oh, we finally got rid of Maduro. Trump's going to put Machado in there, and we're going to have freedom, and everything's going to be better, and it's going to be great for the Venezuelan people. When, Trump continues to say, toss cold water and all that. So you have Republicans in Congress, especially the ones in South Florida, trying to assure Latino voters, like, no, Trump is doing this for you guys. He's going to make your home country better. It's going to, he's all about freedom and democracy in Venezuela. And Trump every single day is saying, no, I'm not about any of that.
Yeah,
I'm not
it's
interested
about oil.
I just want their stuff. I want their
mineral
oil
wealth.
And I mean, what really shows that is him backing Maduro's vice president, who is every bit as bad as Maduro. And I think that has a lot of them very freaked out. And what I'm listening to all of them, and what they're saying is, okay, we just got to be patient. He's going to put Machado in there. This is just just give him a couple of weeks. He'll make this happen, when there doesn't appear to be any indication from Trump or anybody else in this administration that that's what Trump is going to do.
There's also a theory that this all started because he was aggrieved about not getting the Nobel Peace Prize, and that actually this enables him to control who is in charge, and so that it doesn't go to the recipient of the prize that he thinks he should have got, even though she dedicated it to him to try and placate him in some way.
That is the most pathetic thing of all this. And I think really, I think when Machado won the Peace Prize, everybody was like, yay, Trump didn't win. Ha ha, Trump, you lost. But then I think as we drilled down into Machado, we realized, like, she's not really necessarily a great person either. There's a lot of issues with her. And we have seen that. I mean, we have seen the groveling that she has done over the past months since she won the Nobel Prize, threatening to, or pledging, dedicating it to Trump, now threatening to, not threatening, now pledging to give it to Trump if he makes her president, as if
Right.
Trump cares. I mean, Trump, yes, he cares very badly about getting the Nobel Prize, but he's not going to share her prize and give her the presidency of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Is interested in much bigger things than that.
But he still thinks he's entitled to it, and he still thinks he's in with a chance of winning it. And that's the irony
He posted today. He attacked Norway for not giving him the prize. So he can't let that go. So I think that is a small factor in him brushing off Machado. He said she doesn't have what it takes, which is sort of funny because you have all these Republicans in South Florida going, yay, Trump's going to put Machado in there. And he comes out literally hours later and goes, nah, she doesn't have what it takes. Right. What he's saying is, number one, yes, he's mad at her about the Nobel Prize. And a Trump insider did tell one of the media outlets that went into play, that factored into his thinking. But I think more important, he really wants somebody that he can control. And if Machado goes in there, I think he's not sure that he's going to be able to plunder the country of their national resources. But if you get this Maduro cabal who has, been plundering it for China and Russia and Iran, if you basically say to them, we'll let you guys stay in power if you just switch everything you're doing from them to us, that makes a lot more sense for a person like Trump to want to back that group. But the big question is, and I just keep watching the Latino community who has been condemning Democrats. That's the other funny part. They're like, Democrats are defending Maduro. No, I haven't seen any Democrats defending Maduro. I've seen almost every Democrat go, yeah, we're glad Maduro's gone, but, this is illegal, and so that's the other thing. I really want to watch the Latino American community who's cheering this on and condemning Democrats. If the Maduro people remain in power backed by Trump, what are they going to do? Because Trump is already getting killed with Latino voters this year over the deportations. This would just make it 10 times worse.
I've been watching Fox a little bit to see how they have been translating this into their own weird language. And they're doing exactly what you say. They're claiming that Democrats don't care about drugs and they don't care about getting rid of evil people. And the great irony is that this is one dictator overthrowing another dictator. And so, who are the good guys?
With another dictator.
With another dictator, albeit a deputy. So
where are we?
Who are the good guys in this fight is what's so weird. Let's go back to the oil for a second. Trump posted about the oil. I'm pleased to announce that the interim authorities in Venezuela, whoever they are, will be turning over between 30 and 50 million barrels of high-quality sanctioned oil to the United States of America. This oil will be sold at its market price and that the money will be controlled by me as President of the United States of America to ensure it is used to benefit the people of Venezuela and the United States. I've asked Energy Secretary Chris Wright to execute this plan immediately. It will be taken by storage ships and brought directly to unloading docks in the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The typical sign-off there. I mean, this is theft, right? He's basically, he's admitting so many crimes here. He's purging himself so many times in the last week that this, again, for me, is the concern about him never being able to leave office. I mean, he even said the other day, they'll impeach me or they're going to come after me. He knows that all of this stuff is illegal, doesn't he?
Yes. And, last night, finished writing my column after 12 hours. We got a new Capitol Hill reporter, Pablo Manriquez, and we're, giving him questions to ask Republicans as they're leaving Capitol Hill and Democrats last night. And I was determined, when that's done, after 14 hours, I'm out. I'm getting off social media. I'm taking a little break, couple hours, then I'm going to sleep. And then Trump makes that post. And I'm it just wrecked me. I couldn't even sleep because it was it's so disgusting and blatant. And I said at the time, I said, will Republicans now say anything? This is blatant, obvious. So here's what we have. We have Machado, who, in the wake of removing Maduro, offered Trump her Nobel Prize if he will put her in power. And then you have the VP, Maduro's VP down there in Venezuela, Rodriguez, who offered Trump 30 million barrels of oil. Trump picked the oil over the peace prize, so obviously, but here's the other. So what does this mean? The president of the United States is now in the oil business. He's going to take extorted blackmail. So we're agreeing to let Maduro's VP, who's no better than Maduro, and some say worse, we're going to let her run the country in exchange for her parting with that country's oil. How is that going to help the people of Venezuela, by the way, that she hands over 30 million barrels of oil to the United States? And then the unconstitutional part of it, the abuse of power part of it, is the second part, which is Trump has said he's going to sell it and he's going to decide what to do with the money. Like he's Santa Claus or something. That's not how our government is set up. That's not how Article 1 is written. I mean, Congress has the power to do all of this, but Congress is just sitting back and going, I mean, most of them, when they were asked about it, were like, I need to get the specifics. You know, the same thing that they always say.
Yeah.
And then you give them the specifics and they're like, well, you know, I don't know. I'm on to something else now. You know, it's just.
Do you remember during the
unconstitutional?
Do you remember during the Iraq War when obviously weapons of mass destruction, the whole storyline, and the rumor amongst all of the rebel alliance, those of us that marched, was that this was just for oil. Now, here we are, not learning the lessons of history, where in this case, this is the equivalent of Bush saying, yep, we're doing Iraq for the oil. This is basically what Trump is doing. He's admitting that there is no rumor. There doesn't have to be a kind of subplot or a secret storyline to this. He is admitting the reason that he's going in there that is entirely unconstitutional.
Well, and what did Trump say this week about that when that was brought up to him? He said, look, the single biggest mistake that George Bush made in Iraq was not seizing their oil. In other words, when we say it was a war for oil, what we wanted is the oil to flow freely in the market. You know,
they screwed it up, didn't they? Yeah.
We didn't want to interrupt it. We just wanted the free flow of oil, right? So that was the real reason for the war, although the WMDs was the justification, right? And removing Saddam Hussein, who the Bushes didn't like. So that was the real reason. But Trump has basically come out and said, no, I think the biggest mistake we made in Iraq was not going in there in the first place. It was not seizing their oil. He thinks that we should have taken their oil, taken their refineries, taking their oil fields and seized them and made them property of the United States. And he's saying he's not going to make the same mistake in Venezuela. The problem is, if you read all the oil industry analysts, including the ones who specialize in Venezuelan oil, they say that the quality of Venezuelan oil is terrible. What Trump wants to do is not buy oil from Canada anymore and switch to Venezuela. The problem is the quality of Canada's oil is 10 times better. The infrastructure to ship it and move it is already in place. We're going to have to spend probably $1 trillion is the estimate. We're going to have to spend $1 trillion building up the infrastructure in Venezuela, which will take 5 to 10 years before any of this becomes beneficial to oil companies or to the United States. So Trump is saying less than 18 months. There's no industry expert that is saying that we are going to benefit this in less than 18 months. And here's the other question. Who's going to benefit from this? Is the American people going to benefit from this? Right now, oil is $60 a barrel on the global market. Most industry analysts are predicting that could go to $30 a barrel in 4 years. If that is the case, you can't make a profit because it costs more to extract and process Venezuela than the market price of a barrel of oil. So you may get this massive investment by the United States into these Venezuelan oil fields, and they can't make a profit. They end up losing money. And Trump, by the way, suggested that the oil companies will put up the money up front. I'll believe that when I see it. But then the US government will reimburse them the taxpayer money.
Right.
Insanity.
Yeah. I mean, that we also haven't factored in the incompetence as well, because, you know, we're talking about moving oil from here and there and this and that, and we're going to change this and we're taking over this. And meanwhile, you know, Trump was asked, well, who's going to run Venezuela when he was talking about we're going to run it? And he basically pointed to three goons behind him, you know, Rubio and Stephen Miller and even Hegseth. And I thought, well, those guys couldn't organize a fight in a bar. And so this is the problem that we have now, is that we have the level of incompetence that has now got into the equation is going to upset world markets but also that free flow of oil that you described, which is just essential to kind of keeping everything together. Let's talk about Mike Johnson for a second, because you posted that he's kind of basically abdicated his any responsibilities regarding Congress's involvement. Of course, Trump should have gone to Congress to get permission to go into Venezuela. He failed to do that, so he didn't just break international law, but he also broke the law of the land as well. Let's take a look.
Okay, well, that's one, yeah.
Speaker, the president, as you saw, said that he is going to get 50 million barrels of oil or something from Venezuela. Does the president have the authority to unilaterally seize oil from Venezuela and then use the money from the sale of that oil as he sees fit, as he said he's going to do?
I hear Congressman Jimenez over my shoulder, who's the world's expert on all this, saying that is sanctioned oil, okay? And I'm not going to get up here and tell you the details of all these developments, because it's still being developed. There are a lot of ideas. There's some brainstorming being done out loud by all sorts of people, many of whom are not even authorized to have these conversations. I would not run with too many of these headlines right now, okay? I'm telling you that all of this is developing right now. I am very confident we have steady hands at the wheel, and then this will be figured out. So stay tuned. Thank you all.
A theme of the Trump regime is blow it up first and then decide how you're going to fix it afterwards. And this is playing out before our very eyes.
Yeah, it reminds me of that old history book. I think it was Barbara Tuchman who wrote March of Folly. And it's just like we continue to make the same mistakes over and over again with these regime change wars throughout the 20th and 21st century, where we topple these governments and we just assume that we have no real plan for what happens after. You know, we assassinate the president of South Vietnam in 1963 with no clear plan about what we're going to do after that. Same thing with Saddam in Iraq and, Afghanistan with the Taliban. Every puppet regime, that U.S.-backed puppet regime we put in place in these places, it doesn't last, and turns out to be a disaster. And we always assume that, like, the people are going to love us, and they're going to rise up and they're going to be pro-U.S. and they're going to back our people that we put in there and everything's going to be great. And it never, ever works out that way. And so here we are again, where Mike Johnson is saying, okay, yeah, there's really no plan. I really have no answers for what's going to happen next, but I trust Trump. He knows what he's doing. He'll figure it out and everything's going to work out. I mean, that's basically what he just said. And it's like, here we go again, and that's his answer to everything. I mean, it's the same answer to their healthcare plan. We're working on it. We got lots of ideas. Things are working. Or 2 weeks, he's saying the same exact thing here, which is why, look, Trump wanted Mike Johnson for a reason. He had Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi as Speaker term one. That didn't go so well for him. Both of them pushed back on him on a lot of things. And then, Kevin McCarthy was in there, and Kevin McCarthy, although he's like 90% going along with Trump, he still had that tiny, small sliver of independence. And Trump wanted to make sure that he had a speaker that had zero independence, who was just going to do whatever he wanted and never question anything and never criticize. And he found his guy in Mike Johnson, and that's why he's backing Johnson 100%. You can't ever find anything that I think the closest thing I've seen to anything Mike Johnson has ever criticized Trump for is on abortion, where Trump said, they can't let the funding ban on healthcare, reproductive right healthcare, torpedo the Affordable Care Act extension. And Mike Johnson pushed back a little bit on that. But that's the only time I have ever heard
because that's the only thing he's got an opinion about. I mean, Mike Johnson is
the one thing he disagrees with Trump on is abortion. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Rick Scott has been trying to kind of sell this idea that Trump is bringing freedom and democracy to the people of Venezuela. Let's take a look.
I'm glad the president didn't just take Maduro and walk away. I'm glad that he is committed. He is committed to freedom and democracy in Venezuela. Now, I've talked to Marco Rubio about it. I've talked to the president about it. They're committed to freedom and liberty. Now, I can't tell you how they're going to get there, but I believe we're going to get there.
They're committed to freedom and liberty. I
can't tell you how they're going to get there.
I mean, how
famous
many
last
times have we done
words.
this? So Rick Scott, I was very active in Florida Republican politics many times.
Yeah.
I had lunch with Marco Rubio before. Same thing, Rick Scott. Rick Scott appointed me to a position back in 2010. So I'm very familiar with the Rick Scott's political career, and it was largely based on him spending a lot of time in the South Florida Latino community with those voters down there. I mean, I think he realized, like, I'm a white guy, I'm a stuffy white guy, you know, and I'm a rich guy. I've got to figure out how to connect with these voters because this could be a powerful voting base for me. And it was a time really when the only Latino voters in Florida who supported Republicans were Cubans. And he was determined to cross over and get the other ones, get the Puerto Ricans, get the Dominicans, get the Haitians, get the Venezuelans, the Colombians. So that was something Rick Scott did. So Rick Scott has a lot invested in the Latino community in South Florida because they've elected him to many different times. So here he is standing with them after the invasion. He's in South Florida. They're all behind him, all the Latino politicians from down there. And he's sort of like a deer in headlights right now because they're all like, dude, when are we going to get the Maduro people out? Yeah. So that's why he's trying to calm them down right there. What he's trying to do is say to the Latino people in South Florida, because he knows that's going to be picked up by all the Spanish radio stations and TV stations. What he's saying is, don't worry, everything's going to work out. There's going to be freedom and democracy in Venezuela. I'm not sure what Trump's plan is for that, but I'm sure he's got a plan. Meanwhile, Trump's out there saying, nah, I just want the oil, man.
Yeah. You know? But Trump's also saying that he's going to come after the rest of South America. And so maybe we should just talk for a second about hemispheres, because this is a word that is starting to kind of make its way into the vernacular at the moment. This idea of the Western Hemisphere that the Trump regime wants to control. Well, that encompasses South America as much as North America, potentially Canada and you know, possibly Greenland, although Greenland, I feel he wants for Russia, because Russia will then control Europe, and then China will control Eurasia, as it's named in 1984. I actually reread part of 1984 and discovered that these hemispheres are very much a part of that storyline too. So borders are overwhelmed in favor of these kind of conglomerates, three of them that control the world. It sounds like science fiction, Ron, but this is, it seems, what Donald Trump's plan is, or certainly the oligarchs that are kind of puppeteering him.
What's bizarre about it is they've come up with this Don Roe doctrine, you know, this perverted version of the Monroe Doctrine.
Yeah, so
which
offensive.
Is the way that MAGA sort of understands with their limited knowledge of history is the Monroe Doctrine is about like the United States dominating the Western Hemisphere, the North America, South America, Central America. That's not what the Monroe Doctrine was. The Monroe Doctrine was the United States telling Europe mostly, you are not going to have colonies in our hemisphere. We are going to keep you out of here. It doesn't mean the United States is going to like run Colombia. It means you're not. It means Spain is out. You know, France is out. You're not going to do here what you did in Africa and create all these colonies to extort and exploit their natural resources. We are not going to allow you to do that. But the Monroe Doctrine was never took the next step, which is like, and we're going to take over your countries instead of them. So now you have what Trump is now calling the Don Roe Doctrine, which is basically saying no other country is going to be allowed in our hemisphere anymore, particularly China is who he's looking at, you know, and not only that, we are going to control these governments. We are going to decide what these governments do. And we see him trying to do that in Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Mexico. I mean, where he's either trying to control the decisions that they make. El Salvador and Honduras, by the way, another one. Panama, where he's either trying to control what they're doing or replace their leaders actively. And Venezuela is not the end of this. It is definitely not. Cuba.
No, it's just the beginning.
Next, you know, Colombia. The Colombian president is like, let's go to war right now. Come get.
That's right. He said he'll fight himself on the front line if he has to.
Trump to a fight, and
Yep.
said, let's me and you settle it. So that was kind of interesting. you know.
Right.
But,
How
yeah.
worried should we be? I mean, seriously, how worried should we be? Because what we're discussing here is the makings of a world war, the type of world war that NATO was designed to prevent. Clearly, Trump wants to go to war with NATO and will do at some point by kind of picking out these far-right leaders who are currently NATO member states and trying to isolate them. And you know, Italy, for example, and anybody he can get his hands on, Hungary, he already has that relationship with, so that he kind of breaks up the European Union. I mean, this is what Putin wants, and Trump appears to be doing his bidding.
Yeah, I think the Greenland is the linchpin for all of that, and we saw
Right.
the European leaders really step up this week and issue a lot of very strong statements, which they've done somewhat before, but these are probably even stronger, because I think that the Venezuelan thing is like a wake-up call for them. I think that a lot of them were like, it's just Trump being Trump. He's just talking shit. He's not really going to do anything. And now they saw what just happened in Venezuela, and they're like, wow. And not only that, right after Venezuela, Trump started talking about Greenland as being next. So the problem with that is that breaks up NATO. It violates the NATO charter. It's basically a hostile act from one NATO country against another, which has never happened before in 80 years. And that literally, I think what you have the Danish prime minister said, if they try to take Greenland, that is the end of NATO. That's what he said.
Correct. They also have the support of France and the UK right now. They're the kind of leaders that have stepped up and lent their support. But undoubtedly, most of the European Union will rally around Denmark and consequently Greenland. And then, of course, you had that weird interview that Stephen Miller did with Jake Tapper, where he basically said, no one's going to go to war with the United States. Like, no one's going to fight us. We are the superpower, and kept referring to the superpower. Stuff you just don't say, especially if you're like the senior policy person in the administration. I mean, the problem is that they're all batshit crazy, Ron. And so there is no sanity here. There is no morals. They fired all of the lawyers in the White House and all the lawyers in the Pentagon as well. The people that would normally say, no, you can't do that because it's illegal, and so that's in contravention of international law, all those people got fired. So you've basically just left the nutters in charge of the asylum.
Yeah, Stephen Miller went on CNN, and Tapper was like, this violates international law, it alienates our allies, it's illegal, da-da-da-da-da. And Miller is just like, we don't care about any of that.
Yeah.
Miller's like, we're the strongest country militarily. Europe is weak. They won't do anything. What are they going to do? They're the bullies on the playground. They're just like, what are you going to do about it? We're going to do whatever we want. And these other countries are going to shut up and like it. That is what Miller said in that interview very clearly. And so the question is, what is the rest of the world going to do? I think that what you're going to see increasingly are alliances between several other countries in different hemispheres against the United States, both trade and military, where they're not only going to plan for threats from China and Russia and Iran, they're going to plan for threats from the United States.
That's the tragedy of this whole story, is that none of this is necessary. It's just one man with a grievance that has brought all this about. And you would hope that after this one man expires, and that could be for a multitude of reasons, that the world order will realign. But I don't think it can. And I think that we've exposed so much of the darkness of the United States. Because, a lot of the opinions they have about people of color and, bombing Nigeria and various, things, they really are in the DNA of America. And until you actually address those things and try and align the US with the rest of the world, not just in terms of race, but also climate change and the things that the rest of the world is taking seriously, no one's going to want to be friends with the US, even after Trump has gone.
The thing is, politically, there is a decent chunk of his base, like 20%, who is not cool with any of this stuff. They were promised no new wars, no foreign adventurism, America first. They have the same kind of complaints that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rand Paul and Thomas Massey have, which is, this is not what you promised us during the campaign. And there's a big chunk of those voters out there. And those are the voters who have rarely showed up in midterms in the past. And now they're just flat out saying they're not showing up now. They're out. And so that's why I believe that the Republicans in the midterms have a very, very serious problem. And this foreign policy, which they think doesn't really matter, it does matter to their base. Their base does care about this. Sure, there's a percentage of their base that loves the jingoism, loves the military stuff, loves seeing things blown up. But there's also a big chunk of their base that's isolationist, that wants nothing to do with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're wondering, like, when is Trump going to get around to like going after the deep state and all these things that we thought was going to happen that he promised us? Instead, we got him building ballrooms, playing golf, and invading Venezuela. Like, this isn't what they wanted.
We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about how the media is handling this. CBS have basically given up, so we'll take a look at that and do more next here on Uncovered. It's New Year's resolution season. I've tried some wild ones, like convincing myself I'm suddenly a 6 a.m. workout guy, or that I'm finally going to learn another language. There is one resolution that's actually within reach this year, and that's where Mando comes in. I've been using their whole body deodorant, and yes, I've actually received it and used it, and I started with the obvious spots like pits, and then I went full send, thighs, feet, and even the hard-to-reach areas, and it works. What surprised me the most is it's not just for masking odor, it actually stops it. I throw it on after my shower, and I'm good all day. Sometimes even into the next day too. No irritation, no weird residue, just fresh. Mando's doctor-created, aluminium-free, baking soda-free, and safe to use anywhere on your body. Solid stick, spray, whatever works for you. So don't mask it, Mando it. You can find Mando at Walmart or Target, but for the best deal, go to shopmando.com and use code UNCOVERED for 20% off plus free shipping. That's shopmando.com, code UNCOVERED. Support the show and smell better doing it. Mando's got you covered. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. Okay, Ron, let's jump straight back onto this CBS story, because I find this really fascinating. The idea that ownership, media ownership, has obviously changed. CBS is probably at the kind of pinnacle of that change. Before I play this clip, just kind of set up how CBS is just kind of getting worse.
This is really bizarre. Like, I understand like what they're trying to do. They're trying to like grab the center, make it sort of like a center-right network, which they think doesn't really exist. What I say is they're trying to be like Fox Light, kind of thing. I don't know that there's a market for that. I think that if you want Fox content, you're going to watch Fox, where they do it a lot better than CBS, So I'm not really sure what their business model is. They obviously think that there's this, Barry Weiss thinks that there's this big group of people in the middle who are disillusioned with all media, and they're going to flock to this kind of content. But the way that they have rolled this out, and I get that maybe that would work, but the way they're rolling it out is not a way that is going to work. I mean, the guy, Tony, has been on the job for 2 days. They had big technical problems and details in the first show. And that show kind of talked a lot about his life story and his travels around the country that he has planned with Barry. And then yesterday they did a both sides piece on January 6th, where they were like, hey, maybe, this is what Trump said happened. This is what Democrats say happened. You decide. It's like they just they're like, there's no truth. It's just two different perspectives. And then he does the big puff piece on Rubio, where I guess this Tony guy is from Miami, as Rubio is, so maybe they're pals. And he does this big puff piece, and he actually signs off the broadcast saluting Marco Rubio. So it's like, I don't know who this is supposed to appeal to. And now they're supposed to be going on the road. It seems like what they're interested in is making the two of them, Barry Weiss and Tony, I don't even know how to say his last name, making them the stars and making this CBS News all about them and platforming them and their life story. I mean, he was crying on the broadcast talking about his childhood and stuff. It's like, what do we do? This is a long ways from Walter Cronkite. It's a long ways from Dan Rather.
It's just so weird. We are 2 days past the anniversary of January 6th, or one day, really. If you consider that 5 years has passed, their coverage of that also, I have this kind of clip, their coverage of that heavily skewed as well. Let's take a look.
Also tonight, 5 years after the January 6th attack, a group of pardoned defendants marched through Washington. President Trump today accused Democrats of failing to prevent the attack on the Capitol, while House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries accused the president of, quote, whitewashing it.
So with the help of the media, Trump is rewriting the narrative on January 6th, even 5 years later.
What they could have done is, I mean, the White House yesterday put up for this 5th anniversary a website, which was their alternative version of what happened. Now, CBS could have done a segment on that, debunking it and saying, this is not true, this is not true, this is a lie. But they chose not to do that. They chose to just say, you know, Trump and MAGA, they have their perspective. Democrats have their perspective. Maybe we don't know what really happened there. Who knows? But the other thing that they did, if you look at how they framed those photos in that clip, there was only this was supposed to be a huge reunion event, like the 5-year reunion. They expected 500 to 1,000 people to show up that were veterans of January 6th, that were patriots, that were going to show up. And literally 25 people showed up. Nobody went. So if you look at how they cropped the photos, CBS, they cropped it so you couldn't see. They cropped it just to show those 25 people. You couldn't see that there was nobody else on the periphery. That was it. So they actually could have done a story of hey, the organizers expected hundreds and hundreds of people to show up and nobody showed up.
And there's no one here.
Done that too, but they chose not to. So the whole thing was a disgrace. The broadcast was a disgrace. They're getting destroyed on social media. I talked to CBS reporters who are mortified, who are just so bummed out, so depressed.
A lot of them are leaving as well, aren't they?
Ship.
Yeah,
but they make a lot of money. Some of them.
I know. This is the problem. It's how prepared you are to sell your soul, and they now know they're working for the devil. A lot of them. Talk to me about Dan Bongino. Now he's the deputy FBI director. He handed in his notice, or he's quit, or has he gone now, or is he still there?
Yeah, his last day was Monday, I think. He's officially out. This has been kind of funny to watch on the right, in terms of Bongino, as we know, along with Kat, had this podcast for years and years, built this huge audience. And the whole premise of the podcast was conspiracy theories. There's all these deep state criminals in there that are running the FBI, that are behind the Epstein stuff, behind January 6th was orchestrated by the FBI and the CIA, all these conspiracies. And Bongino was like a point man for pushing a lot of that stuff. So then Trump grabs him to be deputy FBI director, which is the person who runs the day-to-day operations of the FBI. That's literally the most important person in the FBI. More so, I would say, than the director, who's more political. The deputy literally runs the day-to-day operations. So he was supposed to go in there with much fanfare, and all his fans were excited. He was going to, make all these arrests. Adam Schiff was going to be let out in handcuffs. Chris Wray, all these people, and it didn't happen. And all they heard was him bitching and complaining. He came out and said Epstein killed himself. He came out and said there's no other defendants in the Epstein case who should be prosecuted. Literally everything that he talked shit about for years on his podcast, he didn't do any of it and said the opposite. So he has a chance to literally go in there and do all this stuff, and he doesn't do it. So then he announces he's leaving, and he's going to resume his podcast career. And he starts posting on social media this weekend, I'm ready to I'll be back on the microphone, back in my show, and I'm going to be kicking ass, and I'm going to be going after the deep state. And his supporters, so many of them were like, dude, shut up. You're a fraud. You expose yourself as a fraud. We're not believing you anymore. I'm not saying he doesn't still have a following, but this guy really shot himself in the foot by taking this job. He really never should have taken the job. Right. He should have just stayed in podcast.
Well, none of them should have taken the jobs. I mean, no. Kash Patel shouldn't have taken the job.
To see how much of his audience he's lost.
Yeah. So Matt Gaetz has gone head-to-head with him on social media, posting or asking Grok, when did Dan Bongino run for office and how did he perform as a candidate? And Bongino replied, maybe if I spent more time at shady parties with moneyed insiders, I would have won. I heard you'd know a bit about that. You've always been a dick, by the way, grifting off your daddy like a suckling little doggy. When I first met you in the Panhandle, I knew you were a piece of shit. It's written all over that phony face of yours. How lovely. That's the deputy FBI director until yesterday.
I mean, what he says is true. The thing is, he's never said that before. You know, he's always sucked up. That's the thing that's happening, is that you have all these people like Gaetz, because Gaetz was responding to like Bongino saying, we got to win the midterms, and I'm leaving the FBI so I can get back out there and help energize and organize people for the midterms. And Gaetz is like, you don't know anything about politics. He ran for office, Bongino, like 3 times and got smoked every time. Like, what do you know? You're a podcaster. You don't know anything. So, you know, Bongino. So this is what's happening. And Bongino has been fighting and battling with all these right-wingers online who have been trashing him. And he's pushing back because he's a Looney Tune. And it's just kind of funny because, I mean, probably after Charlie Kirk, I would say Bongino had the biggest audience of the MAGA podcasters. But I would, you know, he is not getting his old job back. And I would be surprised if he ends up with anything like the audience that he had before.
And his friends are turning on him too. He has a friend apparently called Tiffany Clancy. She posted disrespectfully, Dan Bongino, sit down, the absolute audacity of you. You are the reason people are black-pilled. You've had a year to speak for the victims and you fell silent. It's your fault that we all know there is no justice coming for the Epstein victims from this administration or any administration. It's your fault. We know that this administration, like every administration, works for another master we call an ally. It's your fault. We now know unabashedly that billionaires control every facet of DC. So from this former listener to you, sit down. We don't care what you have to say. You've had your chance. You blew it. Who is Tiffany Clancy?
Yeah, well, it was just a random person who, you know, I thought, you know, reading through all the replies.
Right. Well, she's famous now. She's on the Uncovered
show. She was representative of a lot of what they were saying. You know? And so I pulled her reply. I think she has some like 60,000 followers or something on social media.
Well, let's stay with Epstein.
What's that?
Let's stay with Epstein, shall we? Because there's the obviously linking from that to Thomas Massie now kind of claiming that the DOJ is citing laws that don't apply to hide these key parts of the Epstein files. I read that only 1% of the Epstein files have been have been put out there. Is that true?
Yeah, and that's why I think we've said a number of times on the show, like, what has been released is the tip of the iceberg. We have gotten almost nothing, you know, compared to what is in there. And so the Massey clip was our new guy Pablo, who was on the steps of the Capitol last night doing a great job catching all these members of Congress, Boebert, a whole bunch of them, you know, Raskin, and he got Massey, and I thought asked a really good question, which was, and he was there with Manu Raju from CNN. And they were kind of both tag teaming the questions. But I thought what Massey said was very interesting. He said, you know, the White House is claiming that they're just redacting victim names. And the reason why they're going through all these files, they have like 400 lawyers going through all these files, is to protect the victims. But Massey is saying, no. It's much bigger than that. They're citing all these privacy laws that were overridden specifically by the statute that they passed. And they're using these as excuses not to release certain things, not to disclose certain things. And so, and I thought that was one interesting thing that Massey said last night, was that they are using all of these different various statutes that don't apply to try and argue that some of this stuff doesn't have to be released. And then the other thing that he said is that he believes that U.S. intelligence services were involved with Jeffrey Epstein, and that part of the reason for this cover-up and their refusal to release all of this stuff is the excuse that it is national security. So I thought that was interesting.
Let's take a look at the clip. Here it is.
And even if they had met the deadline, they're avoiding that by citing laws and regulations that don't apply or have been obviated by this bill. So we'll see.
Why do you think they're taking these steps to shield these documents from its release?
I mean, they've never wanted to release the documents, in spite of what the vice president said during the campaign and the attorney general even after she took office. I think they're still trying to protect rich billionaires, politically connected people, and I think they're also trying to obscure the involvement of our own intelligence agencies in this.
It's nice to hear some kind of honest language there. That type of response has been in short supply, in my opinion.
Which is why Donald Trump has backed a primary opponent against Massey and is raising millions of dollars in PAC money to go after Massey. By the way, do you know who the largest donor to Trump's anti-Massey PAC to take Massey out? Who put in the most money into this PAC? Put in $1 million. It happens to be the Citgo CEO. Citgo is the largest oil company that does business in where? Venezuela. Oh, I'm sure that's a coincidence that Citgo CEO put $1 million into the PAC to take out Massey, who's the Epstein guy. And guess who's going to benefit the most from Trump's adventures in Venezuela? That guy.
It's always connected, isn't it? And when you see, the word corruption, I think I said this last time, but the word corruption really does capture so much of what's happening here, and yet it is rarely used by the media. And it really does describe the kind of layers and the levels of criminality that is happening. And, for all of the projection of the Biden crime family that we used to hear, where, his biggest crime was, I guess, I don't know what, pardoning his son or having some documents that were in his garage next to his classic car that he didn't know he had. I mean, come on, we're talking right. We're talking about a completely different level of intent, and Joe Biden, for love him or loathe him, I happen to think he was one of the great presidents of the United States. He is. He is a lifetime public servant. And I think the corrupt theme throughout this new period, I call it the deconstruction period of America, is that none of these people are serving the public. There is none of that spirit of public service, the same spirit you get from people that go into politics for the right reasons, or public defenders have, which I think Joe Biden was once upon a time. I mean, it's just a completely different quality of human and or lack of quality. And all of these characters, they are very much on the wrong side of history.
Think about all the congressional hearings that you had in 2023 and 2024 on Hunter and Joe Biden, Burisma, all this stuff, old news from 2014 that they rehashed, all the hearings, all the subpoenas, all the depositions. And the end result was they didn't even take a vote in the committee because it couldn't even move forward their allegations out of the oversight committee. They couldn't even bring it up for a vote. Why? Because they couldn't even get Republicans to pass that. Yeah. Okay.
But Hunter Biden wasn't even a politician. He wasn't even in the administration.
We went from that level of oversight over nothing to now zero oversight, where there's no hearings about anything with this level of corruption.
Let's talk about the White House website, because I was having a look through this yesterday. And I mean, it's bad enough that he's got that kind of gallery of presidents behind the Rose Garden, where he's put these plaques actually like physically on the wall, rewriting history. And Joe Biden's got the auto pen photograph, and Trump's writing on this plaque, Joe Biden was the worst president in American history. But the website, which reaches millions of people, has also been overrun with this abusive language, rewriting of history, and it's straight out of Trump's Truth Social posts, really, including Mike Pence refuses to act. This comes under a section entitled Betrayal of the President. Vice President Mike Pence, who had the opportunity to return disputed electoral slates to state legislatures for review and decertification under the United States Constitution, chooses not to exercise that power in an act of cowardice and sabotage. Instead, Pence presides over the certification of contested electors, undermining President Trump's efforts to address documented fraud and ending any chance to correct the election steal. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. We should remind people that Jack Smith's testimony was just unsealed on, when was it, New Year's Eve, middle of the night?
Yeah.
And he basically said that Donald Trump is entirely responsible for the acts of January 6th, the insurrection, inciting the riot, and everything that goes with that. It reminded me of the Mueller report being rewritten by the Attorney General at the time.
Yeah, it's what they do, rewriting history. That they posted on their website yesterday on the anniversary of January 6th, 5-year anniversary, where they attacked Mike Pence. Now, you have Republicans in Congress, probably a majority, who praised Mike Pence at the time for what he did, backed up Mike Pence, said what Mike Pence did was the right thing to do. Now, probably 80% of them said that 5 years ago. Now that number might be down to like 30 or 40%, but there's still a significant number of Republicans in Congress who do not agree with what is on the White House website. And that is that's not a campaign website. That's the White House. That's the United States government.
Well, the whole site is a disgrace now. I mean, it's worth looking at just to see how corrupt this presidency really is, and the grievances and the retribution, all the stuff that he promised. I mean, you can't not say he's not a man of his word. I mean, he really is going after everybody. I keep making this equation in my mind that, you know, Trump is just a realtor, right? He flips properties, he's a property developer. You can imagine the number of times he applied to the city of New York for planning permission and had to bribe people, and you know, the whole thing's been documented in various documentaries that I've seen of his early life. And, you know, I think of him, the way he runs the country, a little bit like that. Like, he's so aggrieved that the planning permission is even a requirement that he bulldozes the White House. Like, he is getting back for decades of having to play by the rules and live by the law, something that he never had any intention of doing. And so we are now seeing the effects of one man's dissatisfaction with all of, you know, with having to live by the same standards as everybody else.
He just ignores the courts. He ignores the Constitution. He ignores Congress. He just does what he wants. And then, you know, even when he's asked, like, did you notify Congress? He's like, oh, you know, we'll notify him. We'll get around to that.
Well, he doesn't need to in his mind, does he? Because he is Congress.
Yeah, they're not holding him accountable. The only hope we have right now, the only hope is to take back Congress, at least the House in the midterms. That's the only chance we have of this republic surviving intact. I hope that we make it there. Every day I'm like, cross off another day closer, because that'll be the first time, hopefully, that there's some pushback, there's some oversight, there's some blocking of things. Because right now we don't have that, you know. And I think that we can't just have like a 3 or 4 seat majority. What will really send a message is like a 30-seat wipeout, 40-seat wipeout, because that's going to tell all the other Republicans that survive that wipeout that they better change their act, or else they're next. They're going to be next. It's only going to get worse for you if you don't come around on this. So
my former colleague, Mehdi Hassan, he has been describing how the Democrats could come back with a campaign message of prosecuting all of these cast of characters, all of these individuals, and says, if you vote for us, we are going to prosecute and we are going to deal with all of these crimes of corruption that we've seen, all of them, from Trump himself through to Attorney General Pam Bondi and everybody else, and actually lead with a platform of prosecutions. Do you think that's a good place to start?
I think this is a place where there is a disconnect between the leadership and the base and the consultants with the leadership, because I think that the conventional wisdom among Democratic leadership and consultants is that a lot of the impeachments and the Trump indictments cost them the 2024 election, that they believe that was a distraction, that the American people pushed back against all of that stuff, that they didn't want that, and that is one reason why they lost. I don't agree with that. I don't believe that, but I can tell you that there are many prominent Democrats who believe that, which is why I don't think there's much will among them to have impeachments or have prosecutions or anything like that. I think what they want to do is a lot of oversight hearings, a lot of subpoenas, a lot of depositions, that kind of thing, but they don't want to go beyond that. So it certainly will be an interesting dynamic in 2027, assuming that Democrats take the majority. Is you're going to have a base that is going to want blood. You know, they're going to want them going balls to the wall, all out after Trump and the Republicans. And you might have leadership that is pouring cold water on that and trying to throw the brakes on it. Yeah. I could be wrong, but that's the vibe I'm getting.
It's a worry, isn't it? Because, you know, we all have our differing opinions on what we think the Democrats' next move should be. But I do think that leaning into the kind of leftist politics is essential, standing up for everybody, especially the marginalized. Yeah.
The primaries are gonna really dictate this, I think, because you have all over the country a lot of very liberal primary challengers to the old guard. And if several of those, like Dan Goldman is one that's being challenged, there's a bunch. So if several of those unseat long-term establishment Democrats in the primaries, I think that leadership is going to be more responsive to that kind of an approach. But if the old guard kind of defeats handily all of those challenges from the left, I think that's going to give leadership political cover to say that's not the road we need to go down.
Okay.
That's my read.
Let's, fingers crossed. I'll use your phrase, balls to the wall. It doesn't quite sound the same coming out of my mouth, but I'm grateful for it nonetheless.
Marine Corps saying, I guess.
Right. Listen, well done today. We're both struggling through with the super flu. If only RFK Jr. hadn't.
Now, if you can't
tell.
Right.
If RFK Jr. hadn't fired the flu team who were choosing the strains, we might be.
I listened to RFK. I didn't get the flu shot.
You didn't? Yeah, me neither.
Told me it was
Thanks
dangerous.
A lot. Right.
Here we are, sick.
We'll come back next Wednesday with another Uncovered. Happy New Year to you, Ron, and I hope you feel better next week. All the best.
All right. See you next week, everyone.